Don't forget, you can reach the latest episode of Potomac Watch anytime. Just ask your smart speaker, play the Opinion Potomac Watch podcast.
From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
Welcome back. Let's turn to the convention stage, which on Tuesday included speeches from Illinois Senator Tammy Duckworth, Doug Emhoff, the second gentleman and potential first gentleman of the United States, and then the keynote from Michelle Obama, former First Lady, and then introducing her husband, former President Barack Obama. Let's listen to a piece of the speech by former President Obama.
Here's a 78-year-old billionaire who has not stopped whining about his problems since he rode down his golden escalator 9 years ago. It has been a constant stream of gripes and grievances that's actually been getting worse now that he's afraid of losing to Kamala. There's the childish nicknames, the crazy conspiracy theories, this weird obsession with crowd sizes. It just goes on and on and on. The other day I heard someone compare Trump to the neighbor who keeps running his leaf blower outside your window every minute of every day.
And in addition to being two reporters on the scene at these protests, we have two former speechwriters with us here today. Colin formerly wrote speeches for President George W. Bush. Barton, the author of a very funny book called The Speechwriter. Colin, what did you make of President Obama's performance and I guess the contrast to Joe Biden, since I think both of you are coming back to the podcast for the first time since that Biden speech on Monday night?
You know, I was actually a bit surprised last night, Kyle. I thought at least the first half of Barack Obama's speech really came off as pretty angry. You know, it was surprising to me. He really seemed kind of glowering and bitter with those anti-Trump lines. I actually happened to like the leaf blower neighbor analogy. I thought that was kind of funny, but I thought the crowd size joke, including his hand gesture that got all the laughs, was pretty tacky, to be honest. The second half of his remarks were much more in his old Obama mode. He's unquestionably uniquely good at preaching a message of humanity and commonality and neighborliness that crosses party lines. We know that he wasn't particularly good at delivering on any of those things in reality when he was president, but he delivers them very well at the podium. And I think that was a nice touch of nostalgia for people to be back in that headspace last night briefly for that time when the country is otherwise so polarized. But between the two of them, I thought Michelle and Barack both came off as pretty angry. And, you know, I can go on more about Michelle later, but her speech was also pretty edgy and, you know, at times slightly off key.
Martin, what was your impression? I guess Obama strikes me as a political figure almost from another era at this point. He has this way of framing issues in vague terms, doing the old-fashioned art of trying to speak to the middle, to appeal to people who are not tuned in to politics day in and day out. And in some ways, that style has been superseded in the last 8 years by a more confrontational politics. Politicians saying we're going to, you know, the other side is going to destroy America, and so we need to crush them and implement our entire agenda on day one. And it's sort of a change of tone to hear from President Obama again about the false choices facing the American people and so forth.
Yeah, I agree with that. You got the sense, Democrats in the crowd, boy, it has been a long time since they could really appreciate someone at the head of their party, as Obama once was, who's a really talented speaker and rhetorician. And they haven't had that since he left office. I mean, Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden, both of those are just people, when they're speaking, you just sort of hope that they're not too off-putting. Obama's not that way. And I agree with your assessment. It is like from another era. And he is so talented at, on the one hand, offering a patina of hope and change and unity, and there's not a red America or a blue America and so on. But then if you actually listen to what he says, it can be quite divisive in a nasty sort of way. I mean, one example I noticed, he said, the other side will tell you that government is inherently corrupt, that sacrifice and generosity are for suckers, and since the game is rigged, it's okay to take what you want and just look after your own. That's the way he described the other side, meaning Republicans. Generosity is for suckers. Okay, that's really cleverly done. I mean, I think it's somewhat cynical, but he's quite a talented rhetorician, or sophist, if you take a negative view of it. Also clever was the fact that he mentioned Trump over and over and over, and I think he only mentioned Joe Biden twice, and the other speakers hardly mentioned Joe Biden at all. That is, of course, deliberate, and I think it's part of the effort to separate Kamala Harris from Biden. Harris is, in effect, she's not the incumbent literally, but she's the incumbent party's nominee, and he did a really fantastic job of making her sound like the challenger, as he was in 2008. So, cleverly done, a real talent, but somewhat cynical.
Colin, we'll give you the last word, and feel free to expand on the Michelle Obama speech if you'd like. But my other thought here is just that the contrast is Joe Biden on Monday arguing that Donald Trump has to be stopped to save democracy. He wants to turn himself into a dictator. And one of the reasons that I think many voters are not receptive to that message is you have a Democratic Party in the platform that the delegates are voting on says they want to create Washington, D.C. as the next state, which would give themselves 2 more Senate seats. They want to override the filibuster so that they can pass some kind of national voting law to change voting laws in all 50 states, codify abortion rights, and codify Roe v. Wade, while, by the way, restructuring the Supreme Court. And so I think there's a tension in the message that many Democrats want to put out about why they need to beat Donald Trump. And Obama's tone was different. He did not go after Trump as a dictator so much as someone who is making our politics unpleasant, and he's the guy with the leaf blower, and you just want to shut the leaf blower off.
I think that's actually really a good way to contrast it. I think you really did get to hear that angry piece of the agenda from Joe Biden, and Obama has always done sunnier. There's no question that that's the space that he's good at. It's going to be very interesting to see once she speaks where Kamala Harris is actually, where she's going to walk that line now. The thing that struck me, to loop back on what I was saying earlier about Michelle Obama's speech, was that she really was sort of more in that Biden camp. I think she channeled a lot more anger than we typically see from the Obamas. And I think it's true that the Democrats are trying very hard right now to bottle this momentum that they're feeling with Kamala, and they're trying hard to sustain that and turn it into something that sounds energizing to voters. But as you were just saying, they're not quite sure what that is. So last night when Michelle Obama said that she was experiencing feelings of a deep pit in her stomach and a palpable sense of dread about the future, and that she was just sort of coming out of that, that actually seemed like a moment where she was sort of throwing Joe Biden under the bus a bit and saying, hey, now we're moving into a moment of greater hope, and you all need to be out there fighting for this and out there voting for this. And, we'll see if that's enough to energize the party around Kamala Harris. But I'm not sure at this point that just throwing bombs at Donald Trump is enough. I think you're going to have to see a more cohesive and coherent narrative from the Democrats.
We'll leave it there for today. Thank you, Colin and Barton. Thank you all for listening. You can email us at pwpodcast@wsj.com. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button, and we'll be back tomorrow with another edition of Potomac Watch.